First class isn't for poor officers. The flight attendant sneered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jackson Carter stood frozen at the entrance to the first-class cabin, his boarding pass clutched tightly in his hand. The crisp white shirt and tie he'd worn for Rebecca suddenly feeling like a costume. The other passengers stared, some with pity, others with barely concealed amusement. His face burning with humiliation, Jackson silently retreated to the economy section where the flight attendant pointed, the medals hidden in his carry-on feeling impossibly heavy. He never saw Rebecca Montgomery watching from the airport terminal, her eyes narrowing as she witnessed the entire exchange, her phone already in hand. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about justice, redemption, and unexpected twists, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. The Atlanta International Airport buzzed with its usual symphony of announcements, rolling luggage, and hurried conversations. Jackson Carter, with his military straight posture and closely cropped dark hair, stood out among the travelers rushing to their destinations. At 35, his face carried the weathered look of someone who had seen too much, but his green eyes still held a warmth that hadn't been extinguished by his tours in Afghanistan. Today was supposed to be special. After 6 months of dating Rebecca Montgomery long distance, he was finally flying to New York to meet her family. His fingers nervously touched the small velvet box tucked securely in his jacket pocket. The ring inside had cost him 3 months' salary from his new job as a security consultant. It wasn't extravagant, but it was honest, like him. When Rebecca had insisted on upgrading his ticket to first class, Jackson had initially refused. "I'm comfortable in economy," he told her during their last video call. "I've spent most of my life in conditions far worse than coach. Trees," she'd said, her blue eyes somehow impossibly bright even through the screen. "Let me do this for you. You deserve it." Her smile had a way of melting his objections, so he'd finally agreed, though something about accepting such expensive gifts still made him uncomfortable. Now, standing in the boarding line, Jackson pulled out the first-class boarding pass with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The attendant at the gate had been pleasant enough, but as he approached the entrance to the first-class cabin, everything changed. The flight attendant, her name tag read Vanessa, looked him up and down with obvious disdain. Her perfectly manicured hand stopped him before he could step inside. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is the first-class cabin." Jackson offered a polite smile. "Yes, I know. Here's my boarding pass." He extended the ticket toward her. Vanessa examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, then laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise of the plane. "There must be some mistake," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "This seat is reserved for our premium customers." "There's no mistake," Jackson replied calmly, though he could feel heat rising to his face. "The ticket was purchased for me by my girlfriend." "Right?" Vanessa said with obvious disbelief. She turned to a male colleague. "Marcus, we seem to have a situation here." By now, several first-class passengers were watching the exchange with interest. A distinguished older gentleman in an expensive suit frowned from his seat by the window. 2 women whispered to each other, not bothering to hide their stares. Marcus approached with a practiced customer service smile. "Is there a problem?" "This man," Vanessa emphasized the word as if it were a slur, "claims to have a first-class ticket." Marcus examined the boarding pass, his expression changing from professional concern to something closer to amusement. "So, how did you come by this ticket?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "As I explained to your colleague, my girlfriend purchased it for me." "Your girlfriend?" Marcus repeated, exchanging a knowing look with Vanessa. "And does your girlfriend often buy first-class tickets for you?" A few passengers snickered. Jackson felt as if he were back in elementary school, the poor kid with the second-hand clothes being mocked by classmates who had never known want. "This is my first time flying first class," he admitted, immediately regretting the confession as he saw the triumphant look that passed between the flight attendants. "Well," Vanessa said loudly, "first class isn't for poor officers. I think you'd be more comfortable in economy." She gestured toward the back of the plane. Perhaps next time you should save up before trying to sit where you don't belong. The humiliation was complete. Jackson, who had faced enemy fire without flinching, found himself retreating from this battlefield, dignity in tatters. As he made his way to an economy seat, he heard the continued murmurs and suppressed laughter. His hand found the velvet box in his pocket, and a wave of doubt crashed over him. What was he thinking? Rebecca Montgomery moved in circles he could barely comprehend. Her family was old money. His was no money. Perhaps this entire relationship had been a fantasy. What Jackson didn't know was that Rebecca Montgomery was standing just outside the plane, having come to surprise him with a last-minute change of plans. She decided to fly with him rather than meeting him in New York. Through the aircraft windows, she had witnessed the entire humiliating scene, and unlike Jackson, Rebecca knew exactly who owned Meridian Airways. She did. Rebecca Montgomery, with her cashmere coat and understated diamond earrings, might have looked like just another wealthy passenger to the casual observer. At 33, her beauty was the kind that graced charity gala photos in society magazines. Blonde hair falling in soft waves around a face that managed to be both classically beautiful and approachably warm. But appearances were deceiving. Behind her gentle smile and designer clothes was the steel spine of a woman who had built Meridian Airways from a failing regional carrier into a major player in the airline industry. Not that she advertised this fact. Rebecca had learned early on that people behaved differently when they knew her net worth approached 11 figures. She valued authenticity above all else, which was precisely why Jackson Carter had captured her heart. In a world of practiced smiles and calculated compliments, his straightforward honesty had been like finding water in a desert. She had deliberately not told him about her wealth or her connection to Meridian Airways. "I want him to know me, not my money," she had explained to her skeptical brother James. "For once in my life, I want to be sure someone loves me for myself." Now, watching Jackson being humiliated by her own staff, Rebecca felt a cold fury rising within her. She pulled out her phone and made 2 calls in rapid succession. The first was to James, who served as the company's chief operating officer. The second was to her executive assistant, Claire. "I need you to delay the flight by 30 minutes, she told James, her voice deceptively calm. "Mechanical issue, paperwork problem, I don't care. Just make it happen." "Becca, what's going on?" her brother asked, concern evident in his voice. "I just watched 2 of our flight attendants publicly humiliate a first-class passenger, my fiancé, though he doesn't know that part yet, because he doesn't look wealthy enough for them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'll take care of the delay," James said finally. "What are you planning?" "A lesson in customer service," Rebecca replied before ending the call. To Claire, her instructions were equally direct. "I need the personnel files for 2 Meridian flight attendants, Vanessa and Marcus, on the Atlanta to New York route, Flight 1157, and I need them now." 20 minutes later, Rebecca Montgomery walked through the first-class cabin of the delayed flight, nodding pleasantly to the other passengers. She wore no identification, no uniform, nothing to indicate her position. Just another wealthy passenger as far as anyone knew. She spotted Jackson in economy, staring out the window with a distant expression that broke her heart. He didn't see her. She made sure of that. This wasn't the reunion she had planned. At the front of the plane, Vanessa and Marcus were preparing the cabin for departure, apparently untroubled by their earlier behavior. Rebecca took a seat in the first row and waited until Vanessa approached with the customary pre-flight beverage offering. "Champagne, please," Rebecca said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Vanessa returned with the drink, Rebecca added, "And could you please ask the purser to come see me? I'd like to discuss an issue with the service on this flight." Vanessa's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of concern. "Is there a problem with your seat, ma'am?" "No, Rebecca Blaze Goli. The problem isn't with my seat. It's with how a first-class passenger was treated during boarding. I witnessed the entire exchange." Vanessa's complexion paled slightly. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. We at Meridian pride ourselves on customer service." "Do you?" Rebecca asked, her voice pleasant but her eyes hard. Is publicly humiliating a passenger part of that service? Or suggesting that someone doesn't belong in first class because of their presumed economic status? Marcus had approached now, sensing trouble. Is everything all right here? Actually, no, Rebecca said, rising to her feet. I'd like both of you to accompany me to the galley. Now. Something in her tone brooked no argument. The two flight attendants exchanged nervous glances but followed her to the private area at the front of the cabin. Once they were alone, Rebecca's demeanor changed completely. Gone was the pleasant passenger, replaced by an executive whose cold fury was all the more terrifying for its restraint. My name is Rebecca Montgomery, she stated flatly. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder of Meridian Airways. The blood drained from both their faces. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Rebecca held up a hand to silence him. I was standing at the gate when you decided that a passenger with a valid first-class ticket wasn't premium enough for you, she continued. That passenger happens to be someone very important to me, though that's irrelevant. No one, absolutely no one, deserves to be treated the way you treated him. Miss Montgomery? Vanessa began, her voice trembling. We had no idea. That's precisely the problem. Rebecca cut her off. You had no idea who he was, who I am, or who any of our passengers might be. Yet you felt entitled to judge someone based entirely on your perception of their worth. She pulled out her phone and showed them their personnel files. Vanessa, you've been with Meridian for 7 years. Marcus, 5. Both of you have previous complaints about elitist behavior, but nothing quite this blatant. She paused, letting the implications sink in. I could fire you both right now. The panic in their eyes was palpable. Marcus began to stammer an apology while Vanessa appeared on the verge of tears. However, Rebecca continued, I believe in second chances. Here's what's going to happen. You will both be suspended without pay for 2 weeks, during which time you'll undergo additional training on unconscious bias and customer service excellence. When you return, you'll be reassigned to economy class for a probationary period of 6 months. If I receive a single complaint about either of you during that time, your employment with Meridian will be terminated immediately. She fixed them with a steely gaze. Furthermore, before this flight takes off, you will both personally apologize to Mr. Carter and escort him to his rightful seat in first class. You will do this sincerely and publicly, with the same volume you used to humiliate him. Am I understood? They nodded numbly. Good, Rebecca said. Now, which one of you wants to go first? The scene that followed would later become a topic of much discussion among the passengers of Flight 1157. Vanessa and Marcus, their professional composure notably diminished, approached Jackson in economy class. Their voices carried clearly as they offered profuse apologies for the inexcusable misunderstanding, and insisted that he immediately take his rightful place in first class. Jackson, bewildered by this sudden reversal, found himself being escorted back to the front of the plane, this time with a deference that bordered on obsequious. The same passengers who had witnessed his humiliation now watched with open curiosity. As he settled into his first-class seat, still trying to make sense of what had happened, a familiar voice spoke beside him. Is this seat taken? Jackson looked up, his confusion giving way to joy. Rebecca, what are you doing here? I thought you were meeting me in New York. Rebecca Montgomery slipped into the seat next to his, leaning over to kiss him softly. I decided I couldn't wait that long to see you. You're on this flight? Did you see what happened earlier? Jackson asked, embarrassment coloring his voice. I did, she admitted, and we need to talk about that, but not right now. She took his hand in hers, her expression growing serious. Jackson, there's something important I haven't told you, something I should have shared months ago. The flight attendants were now offering pre-takeoff beverages with pronounced courtesy. Jackson noticed that they seemed particularly nervous around Rebecca. What is it? He asked, suddenly concerned. Are you all right? She laughed softly. I'm fine. It's just. She took a deep breath. I'm not just a passenger on this airline. I own it. Jackson stared at her, certain he had misheard. You what? I own Meridian Airways, Rebecca repeated. Actually, I own several companies. I'm what people typically call a billionaire, though I hate that term. Jackson sat back in his seat, stunned into silence. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind, pieces falling into place of her extensive travel, the way she always seemed to know about business matters, her beautiful apartment that he had assumed was family money. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. Rebecca's eyes reflected a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "Because every relationship I've ever had has been clouded by my wealth. People either want something from me or they're intimidated by me. Was you?" For the first time, I was just Rebecca. Not the Montgomery heiress, not the business magnate. Just me. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. "I understand why you kept it from me," he said finally. "But relationships need honesty, Rebecca. Complete honesty." "You're right," she acknowledged. "And I should have trusted you with the truth sooner. I was afraid of losing what we have." She squeezed his hand. "Can you forgive me?" Jackson looked into her eyes, seeing the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who laughed at his terrible jokes, who listened intently when he spoke of his time in the service, who sent him thoughtful messages when he had nightmares about the war. The money didn't change who she was at her core. "On one condition," he said, his expression softening. "No more secrets between us." "No more secrets," she promised. "Starting now, I'll tell you everything." As the plane accelerated down the runway, Jackson reached into his pocket and felt the velvet box. He had planned to wait until they reached New York, to make it special. But suddenly he knew that this moment, honest and imperfect, was exactly right. "Speaking of secrets," he said, pulling out the small box, "I have one of my own." Rebecca's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a modest diamond ring, beautiful in its simplicity. "Rebecca Montgomery, I fell in love with you long before I knew you owned an airline," he said with a small smile. "I'd planned an elaborate speech, but the truth is simple. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes as the plane lifted off the ground, city lights spreading out beneath them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Vanessa appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, her earlier disdain replaced by careful deference. "Compliments of Meridian Airways," she said, not quite meeting their eyes. After she left, Rebecca leaned close to Jackson. "Should I tell you what happened to those flight attendants?" "Later," he said, touching his glass to hers. "Right now, all that matters is us. No titles, no ranks, no bank accounts." Rebecca smiled, feeling truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. "To us," she agreed. "Just us." For years later, Meridian Airways had undergone a transformation that extended far beyond its balance sheet. Under Rebecca Montgomery Carter's continued leadership, the company had implemented what industry insiders now call the Carter Protocol, a revolutionary approach to customer service that explicitly prohibited judgments based on appearance, accent, or perceived socioeconomic status. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, underwent the same training program, one personally designed by Jackson Carter, who now served as the company's chief of staff experience. The program included not just theoretical training but practical experience. Executives spent weeks working alongside flight attendants, customer service representatives spent time with maintenance crews, and everyone, regardless of position, was reminded that every passenger deserved respect. The flight attendants who had humiliated Jackson that day had indeed received their second chance. After completing their retraining, both had returned with a new perspective. Marcus had eventually left the company to pursue a teaching career, while Vanessa had risen through the ranks to become one of the company's most effective trainers, often sharing her own story as a cautionary tale. On the 4th anniversary of their engagement, Jackson and Rebecca found themselves on another Meridian flight, this time with their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, sleeping peacefully between them. They traveled incognito whenever possible, Rebecca with her hair pulled back and minimal makeup, Jackson in his comfortable jeans and favorite worn leather jacket. As they settled into their economy class seats, a choice they made deliberately when flying for personal trips, A young flight attendant approached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter?" she asked quietly, mindful of the sleeping baby. "The first-class cabin has several open seats on this flight. Would you like to move up front? It might be more comfortable with the little one." Jackson and Rebecca exchanged a look, a private communication honed by years together. "Thank you," Rebecca replied with a warm smile. "But we're perfectly comfortable right here." The young woman nodded respectfully. "Of course. Please let me know if you need anything at all during the flight." After she left, Jackson reached across their daughter to take Rebecca's hand. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "for years ago, I never would have imagined my life could be this good." Rebecca looked at their sleeping daughter, then back at her husband, the former officer who had taught her that worth had nothing to do with wealth, the man who had transformed her company without ever losing his essential humility. "Sometimes," she replied softly, "the best things in life happen when we least expect them." As the plane soared above the clouds, their fingers remained intertwined, a billionaire and an ex-soldier, united not by their differences but by the values they shared. And in the end, that was a first-class journey even money couldn't buy.